You ever wonder what happens when an entire HOA picks a fight with the wrong guy? That's exactly what happened to me one summer when a bunch of self-righteous suburban cowboys decided my private land was their personal shortcut. It started with a dusty old road, a few entitled neighbors, and a sign that said private property, no trespassing. Simple, right? But apparently, common sense doesn't grow in gated communities. My name's Clayton Reeves, and I've owned a 300-acre ranch just outside of Willow Creek for about 20 years. It's a quiet place. Pastures, cattle, a little creek that runs through the north side, and one long stretch of county road cutting across the eastern boundary. That county road used to connect to a gravel trail leading through my property, which, years ago, was open to local farmhands. But as the town grew, farmland gave way to a shiny new development called Maple Ridge Estates, a fancy name for a pile of vinyl-sided houses stacked too close together. The HOA, in all its self-proclaimed glory, decided that instead of driving the extra 4 miles around the ridge to get to the main highway, they'd just use my road, the one that runs right through my ranch. Now, technically, the section of road they were using used to be a public county access route back in the 1970s. But after a land exchange and some road reclassification, it became mine. I paid the taxes, I maintained the gravel, and I had the deed to prove it. Still, that didn't stop the Maple Ridge folks from zipping through every morning, kicking up dust and honking at my cattle like they owned the place. It started small, a few cars here and there, then SUVs, then delivery trucks. Then, one day, a landscaping company rolled through with a trailer that clipped my fence. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I put up a gate, heavy steel, padlocked, with clear signage. Private road. No access without owner's permission. The next morning, chaos erupted. The HOA president, a smug, khaki-wearing fellow named Greg Whitmore, pulled up in his silver Lexus, got out, and started yelling like he'd just been personally insulted by God himself. "You can't block this road. It's public access," he shouted, pointing his manicured finger at my gate. "No, Greg," I said, calm as a pond. "It was public 30 years ago. Now it's mine." He didn't believe me, or maybe he just didn't care. He started ranting about how the residents of Maple Ridge had used this route for years and how it was their right. I told him that using something without permission for years doesn't magically make it yours, unless you're a squatter, of course. Greg didn't like that. He took pictures of my signs, my gate, and even my boots, like he was building a case file. He said something about taking this to the county and drove off, spitting gravel on my fence line. I figured that would be the end of it. But, of course, it wasn't. 2 days later, I was fixing the north pasture fence when I heard sirens. Sure enough, a county sheriff's SUV rolled up to the new gate. Out stepped Deputy Miller, a man I'd known since he was a kid helping his uncle fix tractors. "Clayton," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "we got a complaint from the Maple Ridge HOA. Says you're blocking a public right-of-way." I chuckled. "That's what they said." "Huh?" He nodded. "They called it in as a road obstruction. Technically, I have to take a look." "Go right ahead," I said, pulling the key from my pocket. I unlocked the gate and let him in. He drove down, looked around, took a few notes, and came back. "Looks like your name's on the land registry," he said, tapping his notepad. "You own the roadbed, and the county declassified it in 1993. So you're clear." But what?" I asked. He sighed. "You know how those folks are. They're not gonna let it go." He was right. By the end of the week, my mailbox was stuffed with letters from Maple Ridge. They claimed I was restricting essential access, creating a safety hazard, and violating easement rights. All nonsense, of course. Greg even showed up again, this time with a clipboard and a couple of HOA board members, like they were an inspection team. "We've filed a petition with the county," he declared. "You'll be hearing from them soon." I leaned against my fence and smiled, looking forward to it. See, here's what Greg didn't know. I'd already talked to the county years ago when I bought the adjoining parcel. That county road wasn't on their active registry anymore. It was listed as private agricultural access, deeded to me. So when the HOA petition reached the county office, it went straight to Public Works Director Sarah Lang, who also happened to be my cousin. She called me the same day. "You got HOA trouble?" she asked, laughing. "Seems like it," I said. "Well," she said, "they're in for a rude awakening. The county's records are clear. That road's private. I'll send them the documentation." But the HOA didn't take no for an answer. They started a smear campaign, posting on Facebook groups, calling me a bully rancher and a control freak. They even claimed I was illegally restricting emergency access. That one made me mad. Nobody messes with my reputation like that. A week later, I caught 2 Maple Ridge residents cutting my padlock in the middle of the night. I saw their headlights through the trees, grabbed my phone, and called Deputy Miller. When he arrived, the trespassers were still on my land, one of them trying to reattach the gate to make it look untouched. Miller flipped on his lights, and both men froze. He cited them for trespassing and property damage. Greg showed up 10 minutes later, red-faced and stammering about rites of passage. Miller handed him a copy of the county records and said, "This isn't your road, sir. It's private property. You keep pushing this, and you're the one who'll be in trouble." You'd think that would have ended it. But no, Greg wasn't done yet. He called a local news outlet, hoping to make me look like some greedy land baron hoarding public land. They ran a short piece titled, "Rancher Blocks Neighborhood Access. Residents Demand Fair Use." That's when I decided I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to teach that HOA a lesson they'd never forget. But here's the real question. What happens when the people trying to ruin your name don't realize you hold the one piece of land that can ruin them instead? Because what they didn't know was that Maple Ridge Estate's main water pipeline, the one feeding all 70 of their pristine lawns, ran straight under my land. And I had the legal right to renegotiate that easement. They wanted a war. Fine. I'd give them one. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was racing. Not out of anger, but out of focus. You know that sharp kind of calm you get before a storm? That's what it felt like. Greg and his HOA cronies thought they'd humiliate me, thought they could use the system to twist things in their favor. But they'd made one mistake too many. They had stepped on my land, and that meant the fight was mine to win. At dawn, I drove out to the southern edge of my ranch where the water pipeline ran. It was a long silver vein running beneath the pasture, buried years ago under an easement agreement I'd inherited when I bought the property. Back then, the county water authority paid a small annual fee for maintenance access, but since Maple Ridge Estates hooked into it, the flow rate had tripled. They'd been using that line without adjusting the easement, meaning they were technically overstepping the agreement. So, I made a few calls. The county records office confirmed what I suspected. Maple Ridge developer had signed a short-term utility access deal 15 years ago. It expired 5 years ago, and nobody renewed it. The HOA had been living off that pipe illegally for half a decade. That's when I knew exactly how to hit back. First thing Monday morning, I contacted my lawyer, old Jack Hanley, a grizzled man who'd spent most of his career handling land disputes. I told him what happened, laid out the documents, and showed him the expired easement papers. He leaned back, grinning. "Clay, you've got them dead to rights. You could technically cut them off tomorrow." "I don't want to be reckless," I said, "but I want them to feel it." Jack chuckled. "Then we'll do it clean. We'll send a notice. Make it legal. Make it sting." Within 2 days, Maple Ridge HOA received a thick envelope stamp with my attorney's letterhead. It politely informed them that, due to an expired utility easement, access to the water pipeline under my property would be suspended in 30 days unless they renegotiated the terms and paid all outstanding back fees plus penalties for unauthorized use. I figured they'd try to negotiate quietly. I was wrong. Greg showed up again, this time with 2 men in suits. They looked like lawyers, but the way they carried themselves screamed corporate blowhards. They parked their Lexus right in front of my gate like they owned the place. "Mr. Reeves," Greg started, his voice tight, "this is absurd. You can't just threaten to shut off an entire community's water." "I'm not threatening," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm enforcing my property rights. You've been using that line illegally for 5 years. I'm offering you a chance to make it right." One of the suits stepped forward. Our clients believe this land still falls under implied public utility access. You can't revoke that. Implied, I repeated, smiling thinly. Show me where it says that in the agreement. They couldn't, because it didn't. When they left, I could tell Greg thought he still had the upper hand. Maybe he figured his HOA's influence would sway the county again. Maybe he thought I'd back down once the pressure mounted. Either way, I knew it was only a matter of time before they slipped up again, and when they did, I'd be waiting. A week passed, then another, then, just when I thought things might finally quiet down, I saw a backhoe and 2 men in safety vests near the southern fence line. They were digging. I drove out there, slow and steady, and parked right beside them. "Morning," I said. "You boys got a permit for that." One of them looked nervous. The other pointed toward Maple Ridge and said, "The HOA sent us. Said we're doing emergency repairs." I nodded. "You know you're standing on private property." They froze. I took a few pictures, called the sheriff, and waited. Deputy Miller showed up 20 minutes later, shaking his head. "Again," he muttered. "Again," I said. He asked the workers to pack up, cited them for trespassing, and radioed in a report. Greg arrived just in time to see them being escorted off. His face was the color of a ripe tomato. "You're going to regret this," he yelled. "You think you can push us around because you've got dirt and fences? We'll see who wins in court." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You already lost when you stepped on my land." The next week was quiet, suspiciously quiet. Then the county clerk called me. Apparently, the HOA had filed for an emergency injunction to prevent me from interfering with essential utilities. Their claim? That my land was critical infrastructure. My cousin Sarah handled the filing. She called me laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "They submitted Google Maps screenshots as evidence," she said between chuckles. "They didn't even include a legal survey." The judge dismissed it immediately. That was the moment I decided it was time to close the book on this feud once and for all. I had Jack draft up a new easement proposal, 5 times the original rate, with a clause stating that any misuse or unauthorized entry would result in immediate revocation. Then I added something extra, a requirement for the HOA to build and maintain a privacy fence along the entire shared boundary line. Their expense, not mine. When the offer landed on their desk, I knew it would burn a hole straight through Greg's ego. 3 days later, he called. His voice was tight and shaking. "You can't seriously expect us to pay this. It's extortion." "No," I said evenly. "It's rent." He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "You've got 30 days. After that, I shut the valve. Your choice." For once, Greg didn't have a comeback. He hung up. 2 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency community meeting. From what I heard, it got ugly. Half the neighborhood blamed Greg for starting a war he couldn't win. The other half wanted to sue me again, but even their lawyer told him it was a losing battle. In the end, they caved. The HOA signed a new agreement, every clause intact, and mailed me the first payment, along with a half-hearted apology letter on behalf of Maple Ridge Estates. I could almost hear the grinding of Greg's teeth through the paper. But the best part? A few months later, they had to raise their monthly HOA fees to cover the cost of the new easement and the construction of that long privacy fence. The same people who'd once honked and dusted up my cattle were now paying extra every month just to keep their sprinklers running and their lawns green. One morning, I drove by the new fence line, solid cedar, 10 feet tall, running for nearly half a mile. It looked good, I'll admit, but on my side, I posted a new sign just for Greg. Private road and private pipe. Trespassers will pay rent. I thought that would be the end of it, but fate has a sense of humor. A few months later, a big summer storm hit Willow Creek. Heavy rains washed out the northern slope, sending mud and runoff down toward Maple Ridge. Their fancy landscaping didn't stand a chance. When the drainage failed, it backed up right along the edge of my property, where the HOA's own contractor had messed with a natural water flow years ago. Greg came to me again, this time looking like a soaked rat. "Clayton, we need access through your lower pasture to fix the drainage system. It's urgent." I leaned on my fence and looked him over. "Is that a request?" He nodded. "Please." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the cops, the news story, the padlock cutters, and all the grief they'd put me through. I sighed. All right, I said finally. I'll let your crew through for a temporary access permit. He perked up, hopeful. Thank you. I held up a hand. But you'll need to sign it first. Standard terms. You know how it goes. When he read the form, his jaw dropped. Temporary access fee, $15,000. Non-refundable. He protested, but I just smiled and said, You remember what my lawyer said, Greg? It's not extortion. It's rent. He paid. That was the last time I ever saw Greg Whitmore in person. Not long after that, he retired from the HOA board, citing stress. Maple Ridge eventually quieted down. Nobody tried to cross my property again. Sometimes I still drive that county road and look at the long, straight stretch of gravel glinting under sun. It's peaceful again. No dust clouds, no honking, no entitlement. Just the sound of wind through the mesquite trees and the low hum of cattle in the distance. People always talk about revenge like it's a storm, fast, violent, and destructive. But that's not how it really works. Real revenge is like rain on dry land. It takes patience. It seeps deep. It nourishes the ground under your feet while washing away everything that doesn't belong. In the end, the HOA got their shortcut fenced off, their bills doubled, and their pride swallowed whole. And me? I got my peace back. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch at dusk, watching the last light fade over my fields, I can't help but smile and think, what kind of fool calls the cops on a man who owns a road and the water beneath their lawns? They thought they could own me. But the truth is, I owned everything they needed. And that's a lesson I reckon they won't forget anytime soon.